I'm Lud Davenport of Marion Route 2 at the present time. But as far as mining, I can go back and started in the mine myself in 1925. But in 1933, my brother-in-law and I run a little mine known as McDonald's mine, a little slope mine.
My father was a miner all his life, and I've devoted my professional life to coal mining. Mining in Illinois commenced back around the turn of the century with small family-type underground mines, for the most part, stripping equipment suitable size to perform the job wasn't available in the early years, and most of your mining was done in small family-type operated mines, with the market being the heating coals for your family residences and the schools, store buildings, and the like.
But in 33, my brother-in-law and I run a little slope mine down here, and Kenneth McDonald. And we had screening at that time. You couldn't give them away. And nut coal, if we screened it over inch and a half screen, we get 35 cents a ton for it.
Following World War II, there developed a demand for electricity that I don't think anyone had really anticipated, and large productions then became the rule of the industry. Big companies were formed. Some of the smaller mines were merged with these large companies, and the production really grew by leaps and bounds, right on through about till the 1970s. One of the things that has been following right along with the progress of the mining and the production is the generation of waste products from the mining. Waste products associated with the beneficiation of the coal itself are materials that are not merchantable, and they fall into two general categories. Coarse material, which we call gob, which would be the pyritic portion of the coal seam itself, some of the attendant rock formations that are adjacent to the coal that the coal is located in, and other materials that would be picked up in the transfer of the coal to the preparation plant. At the preparation plant, the coal, raw coal, that is carried there from the workplace itself is separated into these two products of merchantable coal and your refuse. The fine portions of your refuse can be pumped to a holding pond or to a slurry pond, and these are normally not as toxic as the pyritic materials contained in the coarse refuse. When these oxidize and weather, then they create sulfuric acids and other detrimental chemical compounds, sulfates and similar materials, which are also pollutional in nature. In 1962, Illinois passed laws to try to protect some of the environmental damage caused by previous mining and to prevent further environmental harm from occurring here in Illinois.
The surface mines operated without the necessity of having to deal with regulatory regulations and permits and that kind of stuff prior to 1962. Then, at that time, the land reclamation requirements for surface coal mines, and incidentally other mines also, had to have permits and meet some minimal regulatory requirements, and these progressively became more demanding and more complex beginning 1962 to the present time. And then finally, even the underground mines became subject to these requirements and regulations starting 1978.
Prior to the 1970s, there were basically no laws which controlled or in any way dictated what was done on either surface or deep mines in the state of Illinois from the environmental aspect. As a result, with the depressed coal prices, the effort of the coal company was to get the coal out at the minimum cost, and that involved minimal reclamation activities and minimal handling of materials. Therefore, since there was no effort to do any reclamation, any toxic materials which might result from the mining operation, which were concentrated around the various tipple areas, posed environmental problems through the oxidation of various pyritic materials, causing acid conditions and just general deterioration of the areas. An abandoned mine site is just a site that all the mining activities have ceased, and most of the sites that we have that we classify as abandoned are thought of in terms of sites that were done previous to the current regulations, and they are basically sitting out there as a pollutional source. Of course, the modern abandoned mine is one that is reclaimed. The Barber Cay mine site was located near the north edge of the village of Crab Orchard. I'm not sure of the exact mining dates at this mine, but it was definitely started prior to the 70s. And as a result, there was some large areas of refuse material and some small lakes or ponds of water which were on the site. And these ponds had accumulated a lot of acids, and as a result, any discharges from the site and any water which might have seeped out of the piles were contaminating the various streams downstream from the site.
Of course, I knew Barber Cay when it was sunk, but then that's starting to my mind. But now I've been up here in close to this place 33 years, since 1951. It started as just a little slope mine by just 3 or 4 men. But it developed into a pretty good mine, employed, I'd say, around 30, 35 men. And after they went to get machinery in it, and they run a lot of coal there.
I recall real well when Barber Cay discontinued operating. It was either 1972 or 3, and I happen to recall that one of my neighbors told me he was saddened by the mine's closing because that's where he used to get his home heating coal, and he was wondering where he's going to get his coal now. I recall visiting the site at the time we started discussing possibly remining the area. As you enter the tipple from this yard from the south, you get to after you cross the creek, there was the old buildings from the mine office and the washing facilities, you know, what we call a tipple. Immediately to the left of the road, in fact, the road seemed to pass right through the mine yard area, and you could see where coal had been loaded before. There was waste coal laying scattered throughout the area. I don't know how thick that kind of stuff is, you know. It's not readily apparent to the eye, except that you see coal waste everywhere. But to the right, as you go north, you could see this big, huge mound of gob and coarse coal waste material. And then you went up a hill. On the north side, I recall you could see these impoundments that had levees where red water was impounded, and a lot of the runoff from the gob would go to those ponds that were on the north side. Beyond that, there was this pasture area and natural land, and no difficulty distinguishing which parts of the area were affected from the mining activity and which were not. And I recall it was very, very conspicuous, the creek that you cross just before you get to the mine. You see all this residue of blackish material, and then you could see the reddish color of the runoff into and extending down the creek, and on all the coal waste you could tell had been going down there. This was kind of the general condition of the site.
When it come a big rain, you could go over to either one of those benches out of that gob pile, and you know what the water looked like whenever it come down them ditches. But then it was just red as blood.
The Barber K mine was located immediately west of our 1450 mining area in 1980. The progress of the pit was toward the Barber K mine.
In about 1976 to 1980, when AMAX Coal Company was progressing toward that site, they had mined through several much smaller abandoned sites. And there was kind of a running comment between Robert Gates of Illinois DPA and several mine personnel, more of in a joking manner than anything else, as to when are they going to mine through Barber K. And I don't know if that had any influence on the company actually considering that. My understanding was the company had considered that previously and figured it would not be to their benefit. However, for some reason, it was apparently reevaluated.
Here we had a surface mine that was going to approach very close to this big underground waste area, and we already knew from a year or two back where AMEX had already corrected a site which was known as the Morris No. 7 site. And I recall talking with some AMEX people, especially Harry Yoakum, who was their environmental person, that was my contact, about why don't we do the same thing here?
I was sitting at my desk July 22nd, 1980, had a phone call from Bob Gates, who was the manager of the Illinois EPA office in Marion, Illinois. Bob asked if AMAX would be willing to reconsider mining through the Barber K mine site. Bob, of course, was aware that we had permitted around it and we were approaching that area fairly quickly. I told Bob that we had considered it, but we would reconsider it. And I called Jim Shepard, the manager of the Delta mine, that same day and asked Jim if he did want to reconsider it. He said that he would be willing to talk about it. We met and discussed what we would need to do in order to mine through the area as far as handling the refuse areas and the acid water, and came up with a mine plan with the help of Jim Shepard and Carl Bratton. We discussed this, presented it to the Illinois EPA and Illinois Mines and Minerals. And after explaining our position, then it was decided that we would mine through.
During Delta's life, which has spanned since the 1930s, we have mined through several small areas that were similar to Barber K, but Barber K posed a unique opportunity to Delta personnel because of not only the magnitude and size of the area, but also the fact that there was not only gob present, there was also slurry present, and there was also the acidic runoff, the acidic water present. And eliminating this type of a source and the magnitude of this source required a lot of special handling of the material that is a little bit different than the normal mining operation.
The special techniques that were required to mine through and control pollution at Barber Cay, in general, I think, if you think of it as two problems, one would be water by itself, and then two would be handling of the coal waste materials.
Once the permits were obtained on the area from the agencies, we went into the Barber Cay area and began the process of draining some of the acid water that was lying on the property. Prior to discharging this water into any kind of a receiving stream, we treated it with both hydrated lime and with sodium hydroxide to try to raise the pH up to acceptable levels. Once the water was drained, we brought the actual drag line in and began the process of removing the overburden above the coal. Once this took place, we were very careful to make sure that as much of the refuse and gob material that was overlying the site was buried in the pit floor and covered with acceptable and suitable material. Once the mining process was completed, one byproduct of that process was the creation of a lake totaling approximately 30 acres.
Well, Barber Cay now is the land, the way they've got it resurfaced and redone and all, is far better shape now than it's ever been in history, as far as I can remember back, and I can remember back at least 50 years on it.
It looks now, I was there yesterday, you'll go out there and you'll see grass growing on the land. The old abandoned derelict site has disappeared. If you look in Crab Orchard, Little Crab Orchard Creek there, I noticed that it's dry weather right now, and the water was not flowing in Little Crab Orchard Creek, but there is a puddle in the creek, and I saw fish in it. I saw bluegills in there yesterday, and I don't think there's any way in the world that you would have expected to see fish in that stream while Barber Cay was still a derelict mine site.
Typically, we conduct stream surveys to analyze the effects of mining in the watersheds around the mining operations. Prior to our mining and reclamation of the Barber Cay area, our samples taken downstream of the mine site indicated the habitat was such that very few species, such as fish or crawfish, things of this nature, existed. Our last few samples taken after the reclaiming operation has shown steady improvement in the habitat, such that the number of species has increased, and also the amount of each of the species that we find has also increased. This improvement in the habitat is something that we can be proud of and something we could build on.
And I think this is an excellent situation where you didn't just have one regulatory group and one company involved. You had one company and several regulatory groups, and in a situation that was beneficial to not just those groups themselves, but also all the local population and the state as a whole.
Mining the Barber Cay area provided significant benefits to the abandoned mine land program, the state, AMAX, and the community. The success of these efforts were only possible through the cooperative relationship that was experienced between AMAX and the regulatory agencies. We at Delta are proud that we could be part of such an effort.
I would describe this whole project as a a fantastic success, given that we started with a big mess. It was a terrible, derelict-looking site that was causing pollution and appeared to be destined to go on forever. And the ugly aspect of the neglected, old, abandoned buildings and that kind of stuff with trash and scattered about the area, and then the water pollution, well, that's gone. And the fact that, as I previously stated, you can't detect now where that was. And to me, that's the best possible measure of successful land restoration, is when you've restored it in a way that you now can't tell where the disturbance used to be. That, to me, is a good way to measure successful reclamation, and they've done that here.
Nothing that I could add no more than I think they've done a wonderful job and still at it, reclaiming it, because it was a lot of expense to somebody, I know that.